I'm going to introduce our first speaker now, who is, I'm very excited to say, Anat Elhalal from Digital Catapult here in London. And thanks. There's a standing joke, you know, that goes that a data scientist is someone who's better at statistics than a software developer, and better at software developing than a statistician, right? But what is a data scientist ethicist? A data scientist ethicist, I'm going to add, is someone who's better at making comparisons than a data scientist. So that's, Anat is going to speak to us as a data ethicist this morning. Good morning, Anat. Anat is the head of technology, artificial intelligence and machine learning at Digital Catapult London. She's a researcher of behavior analysis and prediction with a focus on identifying innovation and adoption barriers specific to machine learning and artificial intelligence. Before coming to Digital Catapult, Anat was at the, led several global data science teams at a number of startups, including Peak, the cognitive training app, Visual DNA, which is ethical consumer profiling for fair credit card scoring, Faru, a distributed peer-to-peer search scheme, and Anat trained in, I love this, physics, statistical modeling, cognitive science, and has a PhD in modeling human memory using neural networks. Anat, thank you so much for being with us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I assume you can hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I believe the presentation is going to be brought up by you, Brian. Thank you.
Yes, I'm working on it right.
I hope everyone is doing well this morning. I can see 88 participants on the webinar, and you guys can see us and we can't see you. That's different to my normal way of doing Zoom. I hope you're managing to enjoy this glorious day from your computer screens. I can continue on passing the time and tell you that oh, slides, fantastic. Anyway, so I've recently been promoted. About 4 weeks ago, I've been promoted from being just a head of AI to being a head of AI, a nursery teacher, a cook and a cleaner. And the job satisfaction is through the roof. There was no pay rise. And we're very likely to get a bit of a disruption from the other inhabitants of my house at some point. So if that happens, my apologies. I'm sure some of you are in similar situations. Okay, let's start. So what can I do? I can start the presentation. Yeah, presentation started. Okay, so thank you so much for inviting me here today. What I would really like to share with you is some of our practical lessons in AI ethics. So we've been doing works in this domain for almost 2 years now. We worked with tens of startup companies and a few larger companies as well, initiated a few exciting projects, and we really like our approach to it, which is basically obsessed with doing things in the field, helping companies take better decisions on a day-to-day basis. So if there was one thing to remember about us, you have a very practical focus around this. Towards the end of the talk, yeah, I'll also show you a few ways to get in touch if you want to be part of our journey. So I'm Anat Elhalal. My Twitter handle is there as well. It's sometimes more interesting than other times. So just to put things in context, I can start talking about my organization, Digital Catapult, just very briefly. From there, I'm going to talk about one of our programs, Machine Intelligence Garage, which is, I call it a computation-obsessed startup acceleration program, which was also the where we started our ethics activity. So from that, I can swiftly move to talking about our ethics activity, yeah, how it started, where we are, and maybe talk about some of our dreams as well. So in brief, Digital Catapult, we are a neutral non-for-profit organization, and our humble task is to accelerate early adoption of advanced digital technology in the UK. We focus on 4 technology areas, which are really 5. So future networks, where we bundle IoT and 5G, immersive technologies, artificial intelligence, and distributed systems. And we are mainly interested in applications of these technologies in 2 industry sectors, creative industries and manufacturing industries. For the years, we're quite a young organization, but for the years, we kind of landed on 3 main successful ways of operating for us, and they are around building infrastructures and making them available for companies, and I can show a few examples for that later. Build acceleration programs around these facilities to help structure the access of companies, especially young companies, to these facilities, and then work in this I like calling it matchmaking, but the slide says convene and collaborate. So help create new business relationships, and many times it will be between young new players to larger companies. We like seeing ourselves in the center, and we do collaborate with many types of stakeholders, which makes us quite unique. So academia, government, large and small companies, investors, accelerators. And also it's important to mention that we are part of a Catapult network, and other Catapults have similar missions in other technology areas such as satellite applications, medicine discovery, manufacturing, energy systems, and others. Our headquarters are in London. That looks very far away at the moment, but we'll be back to Euston Square one day, to Euston Road one day. But we have, yeah, national presence in some remote places as well. Sorry, sorry, my hay fever. So just a few examples. So a few of our programs. So in as part of our AI program, we have a Machine Intelligence Garage. I'm going to focus on that in a moment. So these are a few of our facilities, and yeah, I'm going to focus on that in a moment. As part of our immersive technology, we are operating a reality capture studio, which is first of its kind outside of the US. We have the Future Networks Lab, where companies can interact with all sorts of immersive equipment, and also conduct the demos. We have the Future Network Lab, which offers a similar offering around the IoT and 5G. And we have a few 5G testbeds where we simulate 5G networks. So companies that want to develop 5G products can test them, yeah, with a real simulated network. And around these facilities, as I mentioned before, we tend to run acceleration programs. There is more information about all of those on our website, but these are a few of our more successful ones, and I think it will, if yeah, might become clear after I spoke a little bit about Machine Intelligence Garage. So I'll move on to that. So Machine Intelligence Garage is, yeah, we sometimes say it's a flagship acceleration program as part of the AI program in the Digital Catapult. And this is, we've been running this for a few years now. We started with focus around access to computation power. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. And with time, we also developed a rich offering around business and investment support. And this grew very organically by the requests and demands of companies. And also, this is where we started our applied AI ethics work. So we've been doing this for a while now. We are into the third year, and it's only fair to mention our funders. We started with a grant from Innovate UK, and we are now partially funded by an ERDF grant as well called KPI, and there are more details about that in the corner of the slide. So we started with an hypothesis. The hypothesis was that to really build groundbreaking machine learning models, one needed access to vast computation, which is really expensive. And if we look at the best achievements in terms of machine learning models, in academic conferences in the last years, the groups that publish them, they don't tend to be academics anymore. They tend to be large corporates that don't pay the market price for their GPU infrastructures, and therefore they can throw imaginary numbers of GPUs times time at training a model and get it to be the best in class model. But that does leave startups behind, and our aim was to try and level that playing field to some extent. We went to many startups in the UK. We spoke to 60% of the startups in the UK at that time, and sorry, that's not true. We spoke to 20%. I see a big 60 in front of me. I spoke to 20% of the startups in the UK at that time, and 60% of them said that they were constrained by their access to computation power. So as a Catapult, we are really well situated to help with something like that. And our Catapult and other Catapults have built before facilities and offer them to companies on a shared competitive basis. And this is what we decided to do around the computation. We created a really nice collection of computation resources and started making them available to startups. Our objectives are ambitious but trivial. So we want to see new products and services. We want to see companies grow in terms of revenue, in terms of teams, in terms of investment. And the companies we are interested in are companies that are developing machine learning, AI-focused products and already have the tech team and the model and the data, and the injection of computation power is what they need to grow much faster than they would otherwise. And we also have a strong focus on products that increase and not decrease social good. So we work with them on ethical use of AI as well. This is one of my favorite slides in all time. These are our partners of the program. Every time I look at this slide, it makes me really proud, because it just demonstrates what a win-win program that is. So we have here, the biggest names in computation power, both in terms of manufacturers of infrastructure like NVIDIA and the UK GraphCo, the cloud suppliers, some best-in-class universities, the UK HPC infrastructure, which are very happy to support startups as well, and the one that makes the inner geek in me happy, Cray. So we brought all of these guys to work together. Some of them are bitter competitors. We have a shared interest, which is supporting our startups. This is a win-win, because everyone wants to know who's the next unicorn, who's going to make it big, and we are trusted to be able to help with that, to introduce the best-in-class startups to these partners, so they can work with them and potentially grow really successful businesses in the future. Obviously, it's a win for startups as well, because they get access to this resource that they need so much, computation power. So far, we worked with over 80 startups. We divide them to cohorts, so yeah, 10 cohorts. We have some really interesting diversity figures, so much better than than what's generally out there. I wanted to share that with you today because it's relevant, but I didn't manage to get the actual numbers on time. We have many success stories. You can follow some of them on our website. And if that applies to anyone who's listening on a personal / professional level, if you are starting a company and think, oh, computation power, yeah, that would be really good for me. So we are now assessing applications for our 11th cohort, and feel free to go on our website and see what that would be like. Right, so this was just a quick introduction to Digital Catapult and to the Machine Intelligence Garage Acceleration Program, which is where we started our Applied AI Ethics program as well. So I'm going to shift to that now. I feel, by the way, this is going faster than I planned. The lack of interaction, I think, makes for yeah, faster presentation than the normal. So,
Anat, can I interrupt then?
Yes,
Slow
sure.
you down for a second. You mentioned is it ML Garage? I couldn't tell in the link if it was the ML Garage or the MI Garage.
I flicked back so everyone can see. It's MI, Machine Intelligence.
Okay. Is that open? Is that cohort open for non-UK based applications? Do you know?
Excellent question. So Machine Intelligence Garage is a program for UK companies, but the Catapult is part of a European project called DigiFed. And and that project has an open call right now as well. And through that project, it has slightly different acceptance criteria and slightly different benefits as well, which are wider than just the garage. But for that project, it's a way for European companies to get involved.
Okay, great. Thank you. I thought a lot of people might want to know that. So.
Thank you for asking. But by the way, if there are any questions, I'm very happy to take them. I know people can raise their hand and you guys can see it, right? I can't.
Yeah, if people want to raise their hand or put something in the Q&A box, we will be here watching that and ask the question when appropriate, and it might help Anat with the interaction a bit, makes it a bit better. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so moving ahead. So let's start talking about AI ethics. So this is just a little ugly diagram that I have to show where AI ethics sits in our story. So we have Machine Intelligence Garage, where we work with more than 80 startups. It has offerings around computation power, around business support, and around AI ethics. Our AI ethics program has a few components. Central one to all of them is our AI ethics committee that I'm going to talk about a bit more later. And we have 4 main types of activities. We have the AI ethics framework that we created and published with the help of the committee. It's on our website. There will be a link later. We encourage everyone that's relevant for, please use it. All we ask for is attribution, say thank you. We are holding consultations as part of Machine Intelligence Garage and other projects as well, such as DigiFed and others. We offer deep dives where we really look at a long-term roadmap of a company and try to give them some advice that will affect them in a longer term. And we also offer workshops, which are great for the peer learning component, so companies can come together and learn from each other and compare their experiences. And our future dreams are around more tools, more technology, more frameworks, more methodology in making all of this, making responsible technology development easier. So this is kind of the outline of what I would like to talk about next. Brian is, oh, okay. I seem to have froze, but I'm back in control. I guess, yeah, there's probably no need to really motivate this at the moment. Why is thinking about AI ethics so important? And actually, I don't really like the scare tactics of you know, get this right, or you end up in the newspaper as yet another scandal. Of course, yeah, that exists, and the scandals are out there. But we really believe that getting it right has advantages in terms of building a more sustainable business, and that ethical business is good business. Many times taking the right decision in terms of creating a more responsible product also means creating a more successful product and a more commercially viable product. And I just wanted, before I even start talking about what we do, I wanted to give you 2 examples of that. By the way, if you were in front of me, I would have asked you, what's the worst example you can think of? What's the best example you can think of? And with worst examples, yeah, many of those headlines that I stuck on this slide, they would have come up. I guess, you know, we heard about some of those. But when it comes to best examples, that tends to be quiet. It's a bit difficult to think about good examples. So here are 2 feel good examples. These are 2 companies that we work with as part of Machine Intelligence Garage. The first one is Hawkstone Analytics, and Hawkstone Analytics are providing crowd monitoring in physical spaces. So you could, if you didn't show this picture of shoes, maybe you could think it doesn't get more creepy than that, recognizing all the faces and following us around. But actually they don't, because all they look at is shoes, and their technology is focused on profiling the crowd through shoes. And apparently you can do a really good job by limiting your point of view to shoes. And I think all of us would agree that we feel a bit less threatened, maybe out of lockdown times, by people looking at our shoes than at our faces. So just an excellent example of how you could choose to limit your business model, but still get enough value out of it, and just avoid the ethical snake bait, which is you know, looking at the whole bodies of people. By the way, just since I mentioned Hawkstone and lockdown, they published some interesting, as a side comment, they published some interesting statistics about footfall in London in lockdown days. So look it up on the website. This is a second company, so they help enhance photography, but as we all know, there could be ethical and non-ethical applications to enhancing photography. So some things that potentially could be debatable, like placing people in places where they haven't been, or changing things that have to do with body image. So they have strict guidelines to how you could or could not use their technology. They make it really clear. And again, potentially you could do more with other products, but you are in safer hands if you use this one. And they're also thinking about how would you communicate that this image has been changed, but only so much, which is really important for you know, trusting the content that you see, and kind of defining a better working point between real and fake. So just before we move on to talking about some of the things that we do, I thought to stop for a minute and think together with you about our ethical norms. And I guess anyone who had a formal education in ethics. So I hear you can even have a formal education in air ethics these days, that it's part of MSc courses, which makes me really happy. So yeah, I guess anyone who has this, had this sort of experience, maybe have seen this before, so sorry if I'm boring some of you. But I just wanted to consider this together. So this is the parable of the flute, and it's an interesting dilemma around 3 kids fighting over a flute. And you are asked, who would you give the flute to? So the first kid, she plays the flute. So you could think about she might benefit most, but also her entire community might benefit most because they will have access to beautiful music. The second kid, she built the flute. So again, you can think about good reasons why she deserves to have the fruits of her hard work. The third kid, she's the poorest. She doesn't have any other toys, and maybe you could think the flute would make the biggest difference to her life in comparison to the 2 other kids. So again, if you were in a physical place, or I was better prepared for this talk with some online survey, I could have asked you to stop and think, who would you give the flute to? The one who would create the most benefit to others, the one who, I don't know, some of us might feel deserves it because it's the product of the work, or maybe the one who needs it most because they don't have any other sources of joy or things to play with. And the point here is that there really isn't a right or wrong answer. We all have slightly different value systems, and normally you get quite a good split between people who would give the flute to these 3 children. But whatever you decide in a problem like that, and many other day-to-day problems that come up when you develop an algorithm, it affects what would you see as fair, what you would see as responsible, and down the line, the effect of your product on its users, and if you make it big on the world. So the really important point here, and that guides our work as well, is that there is no right and wrong. We are not there to tell companies what's right and wrong. We are there to empower them to think about these questions in a methodological way, understand what's right and wrong for them, understand how they can be open, transparent, and communicate about the choices clearly. So users of all groups understand why decisions were taken and potentially identify with them, even if it's not the same decision that would be taken by them. These sort of considerations may also change over time. And yeah, just can't stress it enough. Communication is such a big part of how to get this right. So these are really the guiding principles of our AI ethics framework. It's specifically designed for startups, and the idea is that if you start things right, and if you set the right foundations when you are a small founders team, it will be easier to get it right later, rather than changing a company culture of a scale up. So we like to say that we want to consider ethical development, responsible development. By the way, I tend to use ethical and responsible interchangeably, also machine learning and AI interchangeably. I'm sure we can have a very long discussion about the differences between both machine learning and AI and ethical and responsible. But I'm not sure it's very interesting unless we are in the philosophy domain. In the practical domain, when I say ethical, I don't mean to limit things. I mean responsible. So yeah, we like saying that we encourage ethical design from the start and not as an afterthought. And we are really trying to bring the discussion down from what you should be doing to how can you go about and do this. So many there are many ethics or responsible frameworks out there, but some of them stick to really high level terms. So terms like transparency, explainability, fairness, justice, and all of these are beautiful, but what does it mean in practice? How do you go about and make your product more explainable? This is where our focus is. And our approach is we are not there to judge the companies or give them an ethical score. We are there to collaborate, to advise, and help grow together. I think this is a really good time to mention our ethics committee. Apologies, this slide is slightly out of date. We are about to announce some changes to it, but we haven't announced them yet, so I have to show you the old slide. And we didn't do this alone. We did this with the support of some of the greatest minds in the field. First and foremost, Luciano Floridi. I still remember my first conversation with him. I was quite nervous to propose my idea to him, but he got us from the start and has been our biggest supporter since then. Together with the rest of the committee, so William Blair, Wendy Hall, Heaton Shah, Johnny Tennyson, and Joe Twist, as well as Shahar, Josh, Christine, Laura, and Bukwand. We composed our first draft of our applied ethics framework, and we've been working on it ever since. So it's a living and breathing document. We meet every 6 months and consider changes to it. The group at the second line, they are the ones who help us actually work with the startups. So we meet with all the startups in the program and work with them with the guiding principles of the framework and help them work through some of their dilemmas and the questions that they're dealing with on a daily basis. And we've seen such tremendous demand from the startups that we actually had to double the size of that group. So the group of people who help us do consultations with startups, and we are soon to announce 6 new members to that group. So that's a really nice sign of success for us. Moving to the framework itself. So the framework is based on 7 principles, 7 pillars. And the first 2 could really encapsulate all of them. So they are about being clear about both the benefits and the risks of the product. And it's really important to consider these 2 together, because obviously one is willing to accept slightly higher risks for a product that offers slightly higher benefits as well. But since our focus here is machine learning and AI, we thought to take out a few other concepts and focus on them as well. And this is how we got to these 7. So we encourage our companies to think about the benefits, the risks, the use of data, how to be worthy of the user or the client's trust, how to promote diversity, equality, and inclusion at 2 levels: at the level of the data that they're using in the models, how to make sure that they are aware of existing biases and are working towards better data sets with less biases in the future, that they're communicating really well to clients where the models are applicable as a result of the data that they used in training. But also the diversity, equality, and inclusion of their teams. And in many cases, when we work with early stage startups, it's a bit too early to have this discussion, but it's never too early to start thinking about this and making a plan of, even if the company is too hot off the press PhD students just finishing their course, how do you put some principles in place that means that when you are 30, you will get to that team that you envision that has more diverse voices in it. Next point is around the communication, and this is absolutely key in getting it right. So yeah, how do you communicate to different stakeholders the decisions that that you've taken, and what do they mean? And these stakeholders include your customers or your clients, but they can also include investors. They could include companies downstream and upstream on your supply chain. Future recruits, the internal team, and how you expect them to use these sort of principles. And the last point is around the business model, and especially for young companies, it's easy to imagine that to our really pleasant surprise, many of the companies that we speak to are actually highly motivated to do the right thing and to create technology that changes the world for the better. But how do you ensure that these values stay with the team? It's easy to have good alignment when you are a founding team of 3 or 5 people, potentially you know each other from before, but how do you maintain this when the team grows? How do you maintain this when potentially you don't already speak personally to any new recruits? So what do you put in place to make sure your business grows in a sustainable way? And this is just one of the things that we think about. So again, we think about supply chains, and we think about how to communicate to partners decisions that you're taking about your business model. So I don't know if slides are going to be shared, but in the end of this presentation, I added some slides with examples for the sort of questions that we ask under each one of these pillars, and the full framework is available online. I added a QR code here if anyone wanted to have a look right now. And otherwise, if you just Google Machine Intelligence Garage Ethics Framework, it's there. We would love it.
Oh, sorry. If I can jump in with a question, thank you.
Yeah.
So one question from A.B. Zaremba. Do you also work or plan to work on advising regulation guidelines?
That's a really good question. So as part of this work, we've been in conversations with many other organizations in the ecosystem who care about these sort of things. So they're definitely aware of our work. So the relevant government officers, regulators, the Turing Institute, not everyone. So we are open to conversation with anyone who has interest in the work that we do. We are very happy to tell people about it and explore how we could help. So I'm describing right now our work with startup companies, which is where we started, but we have an ambition to grow into a much wider program that has opportunities for in interaction with all sorts of other organizations, including larger companies, including universities, and yeah, always happy to hear from about new collaboration opportunities.
I have another question, if I can, Anat. So in the 8 boxes you've got there, in the 7 parts of the framework, what do you find is the hardest for people who are excited about a new product or a concept that they have? What's the hardest thing for them to really get outside of their own heads and address there?
Wow. Yeah, that's I don't know if I can think of a single theme. Different companies have the main issues of different companies are in different places. One thing that will always reliably happen when we start a conversation with a company and they tell us we don't need to think about using data responsibly because we are already aligned with GDPR, that's when you know you're going to have the most interesting conversation with them, because and maybe that's a point yeah, worth mentioning. So we see our work as post-compliance. So we don't provide legal advice. We assume that the companies are complying with the law, but law, unfortunately, can't keep up with technology. So GDPR has some great features. It has some difficult features. I think as a philosophy, I think it made the whole industry move into a better place. And when you speak to American counterparts, they are kind of they look up to us for that. And you know, and those of us who work with the in and outs know about some of their struggles as well. But just complying with GDPR is just the beginning of a story. So yeah, that's something that we see a lot. Confusion between compliance and responsibility.
Yeah.
I haven't really answered your question, but
No, that's an interesting one. And I just thank you.
The diversity is another point that comes up frequently. So I think by now, most of the people we speak to are really aware of the fact that it would benefit their company to hire a diverse team. But how do you do that? That's really hard, because there are certain statistics in place about the availability of workforce, and how, as a startup, you do your in your limited capability. How do you do something to change that? Yeah, that comes up a lot. All right, so we gave you a lot of time in front of the QR code. Please have a look. Use it if it's relevant to you, and get back in touch with us with feedback. Saying that it's awesome is nice, but suggesting changes and things that you would like to see included help us move this work forward. So we would really appreciate that. So far so good. We use this framework to consult tons of companies, some as part of the accelerator program consultations, some as part of the deeper consultations, where we provide like a year-long interaction and really have a chance to affect the selling course of a company. But one of the problems with this sort of work is that I sometimes like to say it lives in an analog space. So, and stopping and thinking about what you're doing and taking more responsible decisions will lead to a better product eventually, but it might also slow development down. You have to do more things on the way, and it could introduce a short-term, long-term sort of tension, and startups need to work really, need to move really fast. So our friends at Everyone published a study last year where they surveyed a large group of tech workers, and while all of them said, many of them said that they would like to have the time and resource to take more responsible decisions, the vast majority of them said that they don't have enough practical resources to help them. So this is where we see the field going next. We really would like to see some of some of this work codified and made into more procedures than meetings. And what do I mean by that? So there are already a handful of tools that can help create more responsible decisions. So here are 3 of my favorite examples. So OpenMind have published and maintaining a privacy-preserving machine learning code library. Datasheets for datasets is a tool that helps you keep track of the data that you use in different models and communicate the limitation of this data, down the stream of how it's used. And similarly, Equitas helps with auditing for bias and fairness. So there are already things out there, but they are very new, and it's not always clear for the potential users of these tools. When is it applicable to use them? What are the tools' limitations? They don't always come with the best documentation. This field is very new, and we feel that we could accelerate work in this field. So to kick us off, we conducted a piece of research last year where our aim was to provide a literature review, or we called it in a fancier name, typology, into the world of AI ethics tools, methods, and research to help us translate principles into practice. And we conducted this with our collaborators in the Oxford Internet Institute, led by the awesome Jessica Morley. It was published in December, so there's a link to the publication, and we were also very happy to get it accepted into the AI for Social Good workshop in Europe. So some material from that is available as well. And I was kind of shy to stick it on the presentation, but we won a best paper prize for it as well. So that was really nice. Especially nice coming from an organization like Digital Catapult, because we all love to engage in the academic world and do work that is academic publication worthy, but we don't have a lot of opportunity for that. So what was that about? So we surveyed the literature for tools around ethics, and we wanted to see what's out there, but also map it to this to the representation of which ethical principle one might care about on the vertical, and stages of machine learning product development as well on the right. And by the way, this is normally where I get most questions, like why this principle and not the other principle? Are they the same? Are they different? What about this product development change that you forgot? There's a lot of explanation in the actual paper about how we chose these categories, but really it almost doesn't matter, because what does matter is that there isn't enough going on in any of them. And in this matrix, so this is what the populated matrix looks like, and this is just a color map of how much evidence we found in each one of the intersections. In this matrix, there is a third dimension that is missing from this representation around the maturity and usability of the tools, and that's normally a very, very early stage. I flipped over some details about how we did the literature review, where we looked, and but there's a lot of that in the actual paper, if for those interested. So yeah, I guess when we look at the results, the main thing that we see is that not all areas received a similar amount of interest, and it may be maybe not all of them need the same amount of effort, but I think we can probably claim that all of them receive some amount of thinking and effort. So white spaces are not good. And the even if one finds a tool that is relevant for the problem that they're trying to solve, normally using that tool in a production sort of environment will take quite a lot of work. So we did this work to motivate our ambition around accelerating work in this domain.
Wait, Anna, if I can jump in again there. So if you want to go back one slide, this is where you get most questions. And so of course we have some questions, and I'll...
Am I on the right slide?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Is it okay if I ask you a couple of questions now?
I love questions.
Okay.
I was talking into a screen for...
Yeah, I know, it's very weird. So from Catherine Jackson, she asked, what could be the most positive social impacts of companies and/or governments becoming more ethically conscious of their use of data science, perhaps within the next 10 to 20 years? So that's an interesting question. What could be the most positive social impacts of large entities becoming more ethically conscious of their use of data science?
So we think that in order to be commercially viable, especially if you look 10 to 20 years in the future, yeah, companies will need to do a better job. And while I think 10, 15 years ago, there was a bit of Wild West culture, move fast and break things sort of attitude. And some of the biggest companies we see today, they weren't necessarily following to the letter ethical product development, but I think we are starting to see them getting hit by it. And while most consumers, unfortunately, they don't care. They don't read the 60 pages TNCs that those companies put in front of them. They're happy to get the free services, and they spend little time thinking about the implications. But what we start seeing really strongly is that employees care, and we've done some international work as well. So we had an international consultation last year, and we had many representatives from. So we did it in collaboration with NRC Canada, and we had many Canadian and US stakeholders in these consultations. And what we start hearing is that new West Coast graduates, they start caring deeply, and they don't want to go working for these companies anymore because they don't feel aligned with their values. So that is something that is already happening, and we saw we saw workforce leading to many positive changes before. So, for example, publication and open source, from a culture of secrecy and patents and not putting stuff out there. The need of tech leaders to hire the best in class scientists meant that they had to give them platform to maintain the personal brands and academic involvement. And we moved into a culture where most of the companies would open source, would publish, would contribute to knowledge in the public domain. So we've seen this before, and I think the first driver we see will be for the workforce. But also consumers are getting more and more mature. Generations are changing, and I think we'll see more awareness and more preference for products that treat the users responsibly.
Can I sort of follow up? That was a terrific bit of insight. Really nice to hear that there's some hope for the future, that people are desirous of ethical work. Interesting that your autonomy line is so pale in your graph there. So you mentioned Cambridge Analytica at the beginning of the thing. I think part of Christopher Wiley's book really puts out there that we don't have a lot of conversation going on about where autonomy begins and ends, and the sort of really interesting questions there. And it's not being talked about in politics. It's not being talked about much. Do you find that it's just a question that people aren't equipped to think about, or what is the difficulty in getting the what do you find about the autonomy line that you think would be helpful for us to increase our skills and our thinking ability around, maybe?
I admit you have me on the spot here. So that's an excellent question. I would like to think about this yeah, later, and we can continue the conversation. Maybe it would lead to a blog post or something.
Yeah, no, and it might be something for just the group at large, you know, maybe during the networking session later or something, for people to start talking about the lines around autonomy and what we know and what we've seen and how we can talk about it. Yeah.
Just as a very general comment, I would say potentially. So the people, working on producing these tools are normally people who experience the issues in product development, and I think it's not a surprise that explicability is where it is, because you would see demand for that. And yeah, I think potentially there hasn't been much real life demand for questions around the autonomy yet, but yeah, we should definitely pay more attention to that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm really nearing the end of my talk here, which is good because I'm also at the end of my time. Can I take 2 more minutes? When you let me start early, I was panicking that I was going to, and in the beginning it went so fast, but then I think I kind of thought, oh, I have so much time, and now I'm running over. Sorry for that. I'll finish soon and let you get your cups of tea. So just where we are and where we would like to go next, and I'll accelerate. So we see the impact across users, hiring, employment, and the wider society. And I said here sometimes that actually most of the time there is no clear answer. The important thing is having the discussion and having a good framework for having the discussion. And this is what we're trying to facilitate. We believe that ethical business is good business. And this is all really just in the beginning. We really scratched the surface of the work that we could do, and we would like to do more. And this is where we would like to take it forward. So we are hoping to launch a new program. We call it for now the Applied Ethics Hub, but open for better names. This is meant to be a cross-industry coordinated effort to promote the responsible development of AI technology for societal benefit. And in the boxes here, I placed some of the things that we would like to do, and the color represents how much we've actually already done in this area. So we've done quite a lot of consultation with startups, so we are in the green. We started working with industry as well. We started doing some work in user experience and case studies of technology to help practical development, responsible development, we have some interesting ongoing work in the domain of tool development as well. So, for example, you'll hear from us soon about our work in federated learning, which is meant to take the knowledge that is already out there on federated learning and make it just deployable, really. And then we would like to do some work filling the white spaces in the metrics that I just showed you. So I guess the yellow squares here are more focused on increasing the usability and availability of tools that are already out there. But we already need some blue sky thinking to start thinking about the white space. So this is where we would like to go, and this is what you can do. So as I said before, our ethics framework is out there. Please use it and tell us how it worked for you, and especially if you think we should expand it in any way, because this is how we learn, and we would like this to be a living and breathing document. If you're curious about the typology, so the links to the publication, well, they appeared earlier, but there's also an online representation of the typology, and our literature review was done in 2019, but we would like to keep this relevant. So please do submit your tools and resources that are newer than that. There will be a form on the website very soon, but for now, you can just email us at appliedethics@digitalcatapult.org.uk. If you are listening to this and you're working for a larger company and you think, oh, that could be great for my organization, we also have the industry working groups. So feel free to get in touch about that, and we can tell you more about how that works. And watch this space, because there is a white paper that kind of talks about everything I presented today and more, about to be published this month. I think, yeah, that's me. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Anat. That was really terrific. We got comments during your session even saying what a great talk it was. Just making sure there are no other questions from the audience. I will say I've taken part in Digital Catapult's large industry work group and it was such a terrific experience. So I highly recommend people to look for Digital Catapult programs and events. They're really, really helpful and inspiring. Yeah. So I think that's it. We'll thank you, Anat.